Hello and welcome to English Parents as Pupils for GCSE. My name's Hannah Driscoll and I'm Head of English here at the Reach Free School. This presentation will take you through a lot of the work and activities that your child will be studying in English. On the board you can see a typical starter activity. I might have a couple of images up with a question, inviting pupils to take a look at the pictures, at the images, and discuss what they might suggest, what they might represent. We'll come back to this later. So in Year 10, we open with an Inspector Calls. It's a really engaging play and it's a really good way to start pupils thinking at the kind of analytical level that they need to be for literature. We study the EDUCAS board for literature and the AQA board for language. So that's why you'll see EDUCAS at the bottom of some columns and AQA at the bottom of others. We then continue with our literature theme in Autumn 2 with A Christmas Carol. It's a very obviously placed in the curriculum. It's a really good text to be studying in the run-up to Christmas. This one is marked on context as well, so it really feeds in to looking at Christmas, looking at the history of the traditions and so forth. We then move towards language in Spring 1, where we undertake an introduction to GCSE English language. We look at both papers in this unit, and I will pick up more on that when I talk to you about the papers later in this presentation. We then move back in Spring 2 to literature, where we start our study of the poetry anthology. There is a range of poems in the anthology, and pupils are expected to know about their context, as well as being able to analyse their structure and form and language. We continue with literature in Summer 1 with Macbeth. Again, this is a Shakespeare text. Pupils are very familiar with Shakespeare by the time they get to GCSE, and we will read the whole play and then study character, form, plot, themes, language. And then we move in to Summer 2, where we have a series of revision shorts, which revises all language and literature covered over the course of Year 10. So that brings pupils to a really nice close of the year, feeling really confident with what they've studied and learned so far. In Year 11, we revise English language at the beginning of Autumn 1 and move into studying an unseen poetry for EDUCAS. That's the final literature element that we haven't at this point studied. In Autumn 2, we move into revising the anthology poetry and an Inspector Calls, and then in Spring 1, revising Macbeth and A Christmas Carol. At that point, we will have studied all of the texts, we will have revised all of the texts, which takes us really nicely into Spring 2, where we can focus on revision and examination practice, both for AQA English Language and EDUCAS English Literature. Summer 1s, obviously, are the exams. So in English, all exams are closed book, which means that no copies of the text are allowed in the exam hall. The qualifications are all examination, there is no coursework, and they're all sat at the end of the course in Year 11. Candidates on the English course do receive 2 separate GCSE qualifications, language and literature, and spoken language is assessed and awarded as an endorsement, separate from both language and literature. Now, we follow the language 9-1 specification with AQA, as I mentioned earlier. Paper 1 is Explorations in Creative Reading and Writing, and Paper 2 is Writers' Viewpoints and Perspectives. Paper 1 is largely based around fiction, and Paper 2, non-fiction. They're equally weighted, both take up half of the GCSE. In English literature, we follow the EDUCAS 9-1 specification, and Paper 1 is Shakespeare in a 19th century novel. Our 19th century novel is A Christmas Carol, and our Shakespeare is Macbeth. That paper covers 2 aspects and is therefore worth 40%. The second paper is post-1914, which is an Inspector Calls for us, and poetry. That is both unseen poetry and anthology poetry. Because that covers 3 units, it's worth 60% of the GCSE. Moving on to a little bit more detail for English language. Paper 1 is an hour and 45 minutes, and there are two sections. Section A is reading and Section B is writing. We have one unseen fiction extract from either the 20th or 21st century, on which pupils will answer 4 questions. Section B is a narrative or descriptive writing task. Both halves of that paper are equally weighted. Paper 2 is the non-fiction paper. Section A again is reading, and Section B again is writing. In Section A, pupils will have 2 non-fiction extracts. One is always from the 19th century, and again, 4 questions. Some here will be comparative. Section B is writing, where pupils will be asked to write to present a viewpoint. It's a non-fiction writing task. Moving on to English literature, paper 1, Shakespeare in the 19th century novel. A is Macbeth, and pupils will write in detail about an extract they're given, and then a longer essay answer about the play as a whole. So that one is a 2-part question. Section B is A Christmas Carol. This is a 1-part question, 1 extended essay about the novel as a whole. They are given an extract to use as a starting point, but will need to also demonstrate understanding about the whole text. Paper 2 is a longer paper, 2 hours and 15. Section A is on Inspector Calls. Again, 1 answer about the play as a whole, using the given extract as a starting point. It could be about a character or a theme. Section B is the anthology poem, where pupils will write about the named poem that's printed in the exam paper and compare it to another from the anthology. They have a choice as to which to compare it to, but obviously they will not have the anthology with them in the exam because it's closed book. Section C is unseen poetry, where pupils will write about 1 unseen poem and then answer a second question comparing to a second unseen poem. So for both of those poems, this will be the first time pupils see it. Really importantly, supporting at home. A book-friendly home where pupils can see their parents reading or discussing literature, talking about books, talking about what they've read in the newspaper. Really important. Joining the local library can be a really easy way into this. Discussing and debating is a key aspect of English. It would be a really nice idea for both of you to read a book and then discuss it. It can be the same with non-fiction texts, news articles, biographies, autobiography. Nice idea would be to play devil's advocate, to challenge your child to consider alternative points of view, really developing those analytical and empathetic skills. Please, please, please do encourage your child to proofread and edit their own work. Not only is this a really important skill in English, but of course across the board as well, to make sure that our communication is as clear as it can possibly be. There are a whole range of different online supporting platforms for pupils to use now. There's obviously all the lessons on Google Classroom. BBC Brightsize is a free resource, as is No Fear Shakespeare. QuoteMaster is really useful. And also, we as a school subscribe to Masslet, and pupils all have their own personal accounts through their school emails that they can also access at home. It's a really nice idea to find out which set texts your child is studying and read them too, so that you can help them with their revision. And please do encourage your child to make and follow a revision timetable from early on in the course. There's a great support with this. You Can't Revise for GCSE English. Yes, you can, by Mark Roberts. It's a really, really useful book. Okay, going back now to that typical starter activity. What I would look to do here is to encourage the realization that there was a huge divide between rich and poor when A Christmas Carol was written in 1843. I would then ask more developing questions to stretch pupils, considering how might that help us to understand the ideas being explored in A Christmas Carol, bringing in context which is assessed for A Christmas Carol within the 1843 Poor Law, and always thinking about authorial intent. Well, why did Dickens write it? What message was he trying to get across to his readers, and why? What was he hoping to achieve with it? We would use a bank of analytical verbs to help pupils to put into words their thoughts. verbs like challenging, highlighting, criticising. And really important for people to think about, well, how successful was Dickens' message? Do the same issues still exist in today's society? Because, of course, context is to do with the reader as well as the writer. So our points of view and ideas and what we bring to the text when we write it today are a form of context just as much as the influences surrounding the writer at the time a text was written. So these kind of questions are really important in developing those critical thinking skills in our pupils. This is an example of an English language activity where we would scaffold the task to break down the skills before moving on to longer written responses. We would encourage pupils to really make sure that they're reading the correct section, because of course that's vital for making sure that in language you maximize the amount of marks available to you. We would ask pupils to find the lines, read them, highlight key points with guidance, and then annotate what they have highlighted to show techniques, powerful vocabulary choices, what impressions those create, and that would then scaffold and underpin longer extended analytical writing. For the writing side of things, we would then use examples of past paper tasks or exam style questions. We would discuss the requirements and break down the question. We would do some co-planning as a whole class. And then we might look at an exemplar response and ask pupils to critique it, looking at what they've done well, what they could improve upon, what marks the response might achieve. So we might share the mark scheme and ask pupils to become the examiners themselves. Thank you very much for watching. All of the contact details are on this slide, and please do not hesitate to get in contact with your child's class teacher or with me if you have any questions. Thanks very much.